Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of RiesKitchen. Today we're making that holy grail of gluten-free baking, that being sourdough. Now there's a few steps involved in this and it will take a little while to do, but once you've started you'll be hooked and be making your own bread in no time. So let's get started with our ingredients, shall we? First up, we have my sourdough starter. Don't worry, more on this in a moment. Some rice flour, some buckwheat flour and some sorghum to make our sponge. Then for the bulk of the bread, we have potato flour, egg, maize flour, tapioca flour, brown sugar, linseed, sea salt, butter, pine nuts, apple cider vinegar, and then for the topping, some more linseed and pepita seeds. Now the most important part of your sourdough loaf is your sourdough starter. It takes 5 days to get a sourdough starter up and running. In this case, it's made out of brown rice flour and water. That's it, so nothing too exotic or too difficult to get. Once you've made your sourdough starter, you keep it in the fridge, and then at least every fortnight you bring it out up to room temperature, warm it up and feed her. As you can see, I have my sourdough starter here, and this one I've just write on the top when I started it and when I've last fed it. So she has been activated already this morning, and so it's started to bubble. I've got that lovely sour aroma coming through, so we're ready to go to make our sponge for our sourdough loaf. So what we need to do is grab 200 grams of the sourdough starter into our bowl. Give her a stir first because sometimes it separates a little bit. So now we're going to make what is called our sponge. So with our starter, I'm just going to add the rice flour, buckwheat and sorghum in, and 300 mils of tepid water. I'll get it started to mix. And you can see how that all bubbled up, which is fabulous. That's showing me that my sourdough starter is very much alive. Once we've got all this mixed through and we don't have lumps of flour, we put it aside somewhere warm for a couple of hours, or, as I prefer to do, is somewhere cool overnight, and you get the more sour taste into your loaf. So now that that's nice and smooth and I've got no more lumps of flour in it, I'm just going to put that aside to do its thing. So now the next step is to get our tin ready. The best bread comes from a best tin. So you want a good, solid, heavy bread tin or loaf tin. I've greased this with some butter. And now with that extra linseed, this will help give us a good crust. I'm just going to toss that around inside my tin. And it will stick to the butter and help us get a great crust. So now we have our hero, the sponge. So this is sat overnight and you'll see it looks radically different from the batter we put aside yesterday. So it's got the cracking. When it's got the cracking on the top, that's exactly, you know that it's ready to go. Now it's called a sponge because when you break through, you'll see that it's quite thick on the top and we might even get to a bit of liquid at the bottom depending on how hungry she is. So now to put it all together. The one advantage of gluten-free sourdough is there's no kneading, which is good. So let's pop our sponge into a bigger bowl, and then literally we're going to add our ingredients. So the last two ingredients that I want to add is the cider vinegar, and I want to do that just to help me mix wherever it's a little bit dry. And then right at the end is the pine nuts, which of course you don't have to use, but I like them in the bread. And we want to mix them at the end once I know that I've got no lumps of flour or butter. So that's looking pretty well mixed. So now we'll just add in our pine nuts and mix them through. So the last step now is to pop our dough or batter into our prepared tin. So I'm just going to smooth this out a little bit, just to even it in my tin, and then sprinkle the pepita seeds over the top and allow it to prove then for 3 to 4 hours. So how to tell that your loaf has proved sufficiently is you'll notice that there are some small cracks along the top, and when you press on it, it's just a little spongy. Now I have my oven at 210 degrees fan forced. I'm going to pop the loaf in for 15 minutes. There's also a tray underneath that's gotten nice and hot, and I'm going to fill it with the boiling water out of my kettle here. It's going to create a whole lot of steam, which is how you get that really good crust on top. After 15 minutes, we'll turn the oven down to 180 and leave it in for the last 45 minutes until the loaf is cooked. My kitchen just smells amazing. All right, let's see how this bread is. When you tap it, it should sound hollow, but that just looks awesome. As always, we need to let this cool in the tin, so I'm just going to pop the tin on the rack for a little while just to help the airflow and cool that down before we cut it. Never cut warm bread, let it cool. Oh, that smells so good. Now for all the details of today's recipe, don't forget to check out my blog at the link below. To hear the crunch of that crust. For those of us who have gluten-free, we know that that doesn't come easily. When I said this was the Holy Grail, I really meant it. This tastes like bread. It is magnificent, if I don't say so myself. Until next time, everybody. Ciao.